Hi guys, I'm going to be colouring a grayscale image today. I haven't done a tutorial on grayscale, so I thought we'd give it a go today. So this is a book by Ligia Ortega. If I've pronounced that wrong, I do apologise. And it is from the book Arthur Rackman's Fairies and Nymphs. This particular image is called the Serpentine, so let's go in and have a look. So guys, I spotted this image on Facebook a little while ago. I really love the picture. It's absolutely gorgeous. There's another one that I'm actually going to do as well. But I just wanted to, I guess, explain a little bit about grayscale and what is the difference between colouring grayscale and colouring in a normal colouring page. So before I do that, I'll just run through the technical side of it. So I've actually transferred it from the book onto my own paper. I don't like to use the other paper in colouring books because I know that I'm not going to get as nice an effect as I would here with the paper that I'm actually using. So for this paper, actually, I am using, it is a fairly cheap paper. I get it from in Australia here, it's called Officeworks. I don't know what it's called for you guys in America. It's just Quill paper. It's 250 GSM, I'm pretty certain. I might have to double check that, but I will put the details in the description below. And it's not completely smooth paper, but it is quite smooth, and pencil does go on it really nicely. I've chosen to use Faber-Castell pencils for the colouring part of it because I like the way these actually go down over grayscale. I have a little bit of trouble with Prismacolors because they're a lot more I guess waxy. It is a lot harder to get a nice color over that grayscale. So with polys or Polychromos, Faber-Castell Polychromos, they do go over that color, but you can still see the gray tones through the color, and that's what I really like about it. So I'm only going to use the white Prismacolor pencil to go over the top of that. If you don't want to use that, you could use any blending pencil to blend it. You don't have to use white over it. I used white over it because the scene is quite pastel-y and I wanted it nice and light. So in saying that, let's explain a little bit about the techniques of grayscale. Okay, so I'm using a limited range of pencils here. I've only got, I think, about 12 colors, so there's not a lot to go look at in regards to colors and what I'm using. I'm using a light blue. I will pop them in the description as well because there's only a couple there. I'm using a light blue, and I'm just coming in and I'm just laying this down over the whole area in the back of the sky here. Now, before I use this one, I laid down a little bit of gray, which was the lightest gray I had. I think it was a 10% cool grey, which is kind of a blue grey. So I've laid that down over the areas that I wanted to keep really light. And I always lay down my lightest colour first if I can to stop your other pencils coming over the top of that and changing the colour. So I do like to lay down, first of all, light colours first. Now I'm using really light pressure. I'm putting no pressure on this pencil, and I'm just going over and over and over sections to build up the colour. I don't want to put any pressure on it because I don't want to move the grayscale underneath. I want to keep the grayscale underneath and keep the little details that are actually in that grayscale. So to do that, I do a really light pressure and I just build up that color over and over and over again to get the nice color and the differences in color. Now I'm using the white Prismacolor pencil to flatten down the tooth that may have been left there and to push the color down and make it permanent. So I want that color to stay light and like that. So if you don't want to use white and you don't want it to be lightened, I would just use a blending pencil. So any type that you've got, I've got Prismacolor, Caran d'Ache one, a Splendor, Lyra, I think. But any sort of blender that you know goes well, I would use that instead of white if you don't want to lighten that up a little bit. But as I said, I wanted to use real pastel colors through this. I kind of went off the original a little bit. The original image of his is quite dark, but so I've lightened it up a little bit, obviously, but I really like the pale blues and the greens and things that he puts through that. So as I said, all the first layer or the first level, I usually start from the top of the picture and work my way down. Just be careful with some inks and some printers, the ink can actually rub off the page. So I've actually used an inkjet printer and used really good quality print so that none of that ink will come off or peel off. If I had have used a laser printer on this paper, because it's rougher than say a marker paper, the ink from the laser actually peels off a lot when I use that. So I usually prefer to go with using a inkjet printer to do this part of the printing. So I'm going to come back in a sec. I've left out all of the trees. So I've done a little bit of this color into the trees there. And I'm not worried about going over that color because I'm going to put in some browns and greens and things over the top of that. So I guess the technique that I'm going to use is I'm just really smudging the color in all around. I'm not worrying about being too precise where I go in this part because I want some of that color to be behind the trees as well. So because I'm using really light pressure, it doesn't actually matter that I've gone over the trees or different parts of the horizon with the different colors, because they're going to get built up upon anyway. So if I come back in now with green, it's going to go over the pink that I just put in. So I've used some pink there just to put some of the, I guess, a bit of a sunset color through there. And also I've got some flesh color there, which I'm using to blend that through. So you can see that I'm rubbing that over the trees as well, because I want to get in between those areas with this color as well. And because I've used that light pressure, I could still come back over with green and include that in a little bit later. So I always try, as I said, start from the lightest color and I sort of go work my way up. That particular time I used a little bit of a darker pink, and I actually used the flesh to blend it out a bit because I wanted to keep that color. I didn't want it to whiten up too much, so that's why I've used the flesh instead. So I guess I'm going to work through and let you guys watch it. I have got it in fast mode. You could slow it down if you really wanted to. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask either. So I'm just going to say the difference between this and doing a normal coloring is with normal coloring, you have to figure out your own shading. You have to work out where you're putting your highlights and your shadows and things like that. Whereas with Greyscale, it's already done for you. Also too, with Greyscale, you can be a little bit rougher of where you're putting the color because the Greyscale's already there and giving you what you need for the eye to make that look good. So what I mean by that is that you can just put random little circles of color into a section and the Greyscale picture's coming up through that, so you can't really tell that you've only just scribbled on a little circle of that color. So I don't try to concentrate on the details too much. I'm going to concentrate more on the stuff that's in the foreground, so closest to me. So this tree that is coming over the whole scene there, that's actually closer and in front of the person taking the photo or painting the painting. And whereas all of those trees that we're looking at in the background, they're far, far, far into the distance. So I will put a little bit more detail into the closer up things, but with this further back stuff, we're just really laying down color on top of what's already there. Because the shadows and highlights and things are already in the picture for us, we don't need to do any of that, which is what makes it actually easier than doing a normal coloring in. So I'm doing a lot of talking through this one, and I apologize if you don't like the sound of my voice. Too bad. Look, I've actually come in and I've used a lighter green and I've also used a darker green. So I've gone into areas where I think that shadow should be a little bit darker. You'll find that the ink's a lot darker in those areas, so I'll go over that with a darker color. And then I've just come in and around that and used a lighter green to put more color through there and put a little bit of yellow into where the lights and things are at the back there. Now I've come back in with this peach or I think it's light flesh color, this particular one, and I'm just putting a little bit more of that color in behind the trees. So I've just gone over the green that I've just done. I haven't really worried about where I'm going. So I know that sounds really strange and that might worry you, but it's nothing to worry about. Just go in and put color over it. Don't put too much pressure on it. Make sure you're keeping your pressure nice and light, because otherwise you're going to make that look strange. But you can already see here, now I'm just going to put a little bit of detail in this front part, so you can actually see what's happening on that right side of the picture already. It's already starting to look like a painting, even though all I've done is squiggle on color. So I've just laid the color down and just kept layering it over the top of each other, and I'm just doing little circular motions all over there, and I'm not sort of drawing a defined line like I am right now. So at the moment I'm coming over with a brown violet color, or browny red color. I'm not sure exactly what number it is in the description though, so check that out. And I'm just going in and I'm actually lining these because I want these to stand out, and I want those to be more catching to the eye than the background. So the background pieces are looking a little bit smudged in, and your eye automatically fills in those details. It sees that without you even registering that that's what's happening. So because we're putting this nice detail in front there, the rest of that's going to look blurry anyway, because our eyes concentrating on these front twigs in the front, and we're really only just glazing over the stuff that's right behind it. So this is the thing that I want to have fairly nice. So I've come in and just gone over that, and I'm actually smudging it out here in the top part with the blue because we had blue sky, so I wanted to smudge that out a bit with that. And I've just used a little bit of white to come in and just blend that out a little bit more. So I'm just smudging in the color over the top and softening off the lines that I've just put in. So in the blue parts here, I'm putting in with the blue, and then as I come down into the green, I'm swapping to that lighter green, and I'm going over with the green to blend it and smudge it in, and then coming back over with the white. So you can see that each section that I'm doing, so starting off at the sky, I use the blues to smudge it in, then coming into the grass there, I've used green to smudge it in, because I want the colors to sort of blend and smooth in nicely. So I'm using white again to go over those sections, and then we'll move across to the other side and we'll get to the lake and things like that later on. So the same here with the green. I'm coming in and just doing all of the areas. So there was bits of grass on the left side there that were darker than other parts of grass, so I've gone over that with a darker green. So that kind of makes sense to go dark where there's darker areas. I've brought in a lighter green to do the lighter areas, and I'm just going straight over the top of what I previously did. I'm only leaving or not colouring over sections that I want to be brighter. So all of the tree sections, I'm just going straight over the top. I'm using circular motions and just rubbing that light green over the top, and then I'm using that flesh colour to help blend that in a little bit. Now I'm using the flesh colour here because it's closer to the sky and it's kind of pink down in that area. I'm going to line in now with that brown, that purpley reddish brown there. I'm lining that in now, and I'm going to blend that out again with that peach color. But you can still see now what I'm actually doing. I'm creating some definition on each of those, but all I did was use the lines that were already there. I didn't draw in anything extra. I just went over the lines that were already there and created what I was after. So I'm going to move on to the bridge area. I'm using a little bit of light blue here again because we've got a little bit of reflection off the sky. So the rest of the water is actually going to be blues. So we'll use some light blues, some greens, and I'll bring in a dark blue as well to do the shadows of the trees on the water there as well. So I've got a little bit of a darker grey to do underneath the bridge here, and then just blending that out with some blue and a little bit of white. I don't want to go too much over the shadow areas with the white because it'll really dull it off too much. I do want some contrast between the light and the dark, so I've used the lighter grey pencil to go over those areas just so it wasn't too white. So I hope that this is helping you understand what grayscale is and how to get it to work for you. So I'm coming in now to do the water. I'm using a fair bit of white in this front part because there's lots of white reflections here off the water, and I'm making sure that I'm putting in the darker areas where the picture has darker areas. So that's all you need to do, is follow the darker areas with darker colors and the lighter areas with lighter colors. So I'm just going to go along and fill out, I'm swapping pencils so often it was really hard for me to narrate what colours and things like that I was using. But to be honest, you could use any colours that you want. So don't be stuck on, oh, I need to know what exactly that colour is that you're using right there. I mean, I am going to put it in the description as I said before, but it really isn't important what color you're using as long as you've got a lighter blue, a darker blue, and you know you've got a dark and a light shade of each of the colors that you're using there. So I'm just coming in and I'm just layering all that through. So I'm just lightly not putting much pressure on. I'm just lightly going over the darker colors now, and I'm sort of bringing this a little bit further out in towards the water as well. I'm going to use white obviously to blend all this out as well. So you can see that those lines look a little bit jagged now, but once I go over it with the white, they actually smudge in and they look nice and blended there. So I'm making sure that I'm putting the colors that are in the background, so reflecting, because that background image is actually reflecting on the water. You need to sort of put the colors that are reflecting back in there as well, I guess. We don't want to do it too dark like we have in the actual background, because it is water, so there's going to be you've got a muted color there because you're using, it's really more just shadows. So don't put too much color into these, try and keep them darker colors. I've only done a few lighter colors over those plants, the tree reflections, but I'm going to go over that with white anyway, so it's going to lighten it up a lot, and it's also going to make it nice and smudged in and smooth as well. So I've just continued on with this pencil down into the bottom area here. I'm going to need to come back in with colour when we get down to this section anyway. So still with that lighter blue. And I'm going to make sure that I don't go over any really light sections with this colour, because I actually want a little bit of white. So anywhere that was really bright white on the picture, I've actually left, I haven't coloured over that with this blue, I've left those sections. So I'm coming in now with the white, and I'm doing this all over the image now that I've already coloured. So all over the water, over where I've done the trees, and also where I've done all the shadows on the water. So I'm going to come in and use that, and also down the bottom where there was some little ripples in the water, this will go over the top of that this time. Because I wanted those a little bit whiter, I've left them till now. Just re-going over the twigs and hanging over the water there, making them a little bit darker now, because I'm going to go over them with some white as well. So I'm just going to smudge them in so that they're not too defined, and they don't look messy and just scribbled on. I'm going to put a little bit more detail into the fairies, and I'm going to use some purples and pinks through here. I'm also going to use the white over the top as well. I'm going to put a little bit of flesh color through on their skin, just in there. I'm not putting too much detail in. I'm just really going over the darker lines with these colors. So as I said before, you don't want to put too much into it because you want it sort of to blend in with the picture as well, using that grayscale to your advantage, I guess. So I'm just going to come in and finish that off. I'm using some dark green there as well, and a little bit of black, just to sort of put in the shadow areas and things like that. So they are quite tiny little areas, but yeah, just put in the best you can. As I said before, you really can't see those little details anyway. So even though I'm using really subtle colours, you can really see the little creatures or the little fairies coming to life by adding in that colour. So I guess just give it a go and don't be too daunted, or think that it's daunting to go ahead and colour in a grayscale image. It is quite easy to do. You don't need to worry about as much as what you do with normal colouring pages. You've got a lot of room to sort of put in your own style as well, because you can put your own colors and things like that into it. So as I said, I used the original painting for inspiration for the coloring that I've used. So I've used a dark green, a light green, a nice dark pink. I've used flesh tone. I've used some browns through there with the trees that are overhanging the lake there is browns. I've also used I'm going to use some other lighter browns to go through on the rocks and things like that as well. So really, as long as you've got something to go by, and if you've made that image too dark, you're not going to see as much of the lighter colors. If you've made it too light, it's going to be harder for you to see the shadows and things like that as well. So really just give it a go is what I say. And as I said, I'm not putting a lot of detail in. The only time I'm putting pressure on is where there's a lot of shadow and I want to make it really defined. The rest of the time I'm using very light pressure and just building up that color onto the picture. So in a little bit I'll finish off this background area here, but there's not really much else that I want to go through with you, so I'll just let you watch the rest of this, and then I'll have a chat at the end. So I'm finishing that up now. I'm just going over the last layer with some white and just smudging all that in nicely so that it doesn't look too defined and it blends nicely with the rest of the picture. So I hope you really enjoyed this one. I know that it's something different and there's not a lot sort of for me to go through with you. This is how I do grayscale. Some other people might do grayscale differently. I do have a little bit of trouble using markers with grayscale. I can't get the same effects and my markers end up getting black ink on them and things like that, so I tend not to go for markers. But with pencils, this is an easier option for me to do rather than doing a whole picture using pencils, so it's easier on my hands and things like that as well. So guys, if you have any questions, please do ask. You can join our Facebook group. Also, you can follow me on Instagram. If you have any questions, please do ask. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Thanks, guys.